Hi everyone, Scott here, and I wanted to go over with you today and give you something to experiment with, and it will help you understand the difference between walking and running. And these are two distinct movements. In walking, of course, we always have at least one foot on the ground, and in running, we go through a brief instant where both feet are off the ground. So profoundly different movements. So we're going to go through a couple of things here, and I'm going to emphasize one particular movement because we're going to go back and forth between walking and marching. So marching is a particular kind of walking that can lead to running. What's the difference between walking and running? All right, so we're going to use some hip flexion, that's marching. And why do we need a little bit more hip flexion in running than we do in walking? Well, the front leg has to be lifted off the ground enough for you to allow for a stride. That means the front leg has to be lifted off the ground enough in the proper timing of your running to allow you to come off the back foot. So, certainly, hip flexion is not the only movement involved in running, but it's one we're going to play with here. So let's really clarify what the difference between walking and running is. So let's start over here, and we're going to do some walking. All right? So we're going to walk forward and we're going to walk backwards. And as you can see, we have one foot on the ground at all times. Now, if you were to slow that down, you can really find out what walking is about. All right, so you take one foot a step forward, but now I am on my back foot until my weight is completely over my front foot. I'm still on both feet, but I have come off my back foot a little bit because I'm standing well on my front foot. And then when I advance again, I stay on my back foot to guide my front foot forward. So it's really clear when we go slowly what we're doing with walking. The back foot stays on the ground and it begins to come off the ground as you put weight on the front foot. Now my back foot, the heel is off the ground, but I have my weight on the front foot. So if I were to go back, I would keep my weight on the front foot until I have guided it all the way onto the back foot. And as that's happening, then the weight comes off the front of my front foot. Now I'm on the ball of my foot, or the heel of my foot, and I take a step backwards. So I'm really using both feet to maintain my balance, and I have one foot on the ground at all times, and both feet on the ground quite a bit. So right now I have both feet on the ground. I'm going to take a step backwards. But I left my front foot on the ground to guide my back foot. Both feet are completely on the ground, so there you have your balance, and you can clearly see how you're walking. So now we're going to go ahead and march. March a little bit. And I march high enough that you can tell the difference between walking and marching. That's the only reason I'm marching this high, because if I were running very slowly, it might involve only just a slight movement like that. But in running, you want to land under the hip. So when you pick up a foot, it basically comes down when you're in full weight bearing, right under your hip, and about where you started when you lifted it. So in walking, you're going to stride out, both feet are on the floor, like that. You're going to walk, walk, walk. In running, you're also going to leave the back foot on the floor for a little bit. But let's go ahead and focus again on the difference between walking and running. So running requires just a little bit of hip flexion more than walking does. So, as I march, I'm still walking up to a point. But I'm really making a transition and a distinction between walking and running. So if I were to continue to do that, so I could do it very slightly. if I wanted to. But it would still be a different movement from purely walking. So now if I were to do that, and I were to march a little bit, I could come off that back foot, and then I would be running. There would be that brief moment where both feet are off the ground. So that's the difference between walking and running. So when you march, you're very close. As long as you come off that back foot a little bit, you are running. So that's one of the key elements of transition between walking and running. So you're going to lift those knees and you're going to use a little bit of hip flexion. Now, something you might not be familiar with is that the psoas muscle, the iliopsoas complex, two muscle groups that work together, is a muscle that is very strong, but you can't see it. So it connects, here's your thigh bone here. Connects very high on the thigh bone so that you can actually lift this leg without using any muscles that are actually in the leg. So that's a very interesting sensation, so you can see how easy it is to lift that knee. Now, I'm not asking you to have high knees. I'm just asking you to feel and learn the transition between walking and running so that you don't shuffle. And so I'm also saying that we can do this very easily for two reasons. One, the psoas is very strong, and we don't need the leg muscles. So I'm going to familiarize you with an expression. You may or may not have heard this before. I don't know. But the idea is to run on your legs, not with your legs. So we're using all the muscles in the torso and hips to get our power. So the psoas muscle is a very strong muscle, but you can't see it, and the reason you can't see it is because it attaches very high on the leg, on the inside of the leg, and then it comes underneath the abdominal muscles and attaches to the backside of the pelvis and to the ribs, clear up to about T12. So yeah, you're really pulling on a muscle that's very, very high, and it doesn't involve effort from the legs, very much effort from the legs. And then again, if you were to turn from the side, and if you were to take a step, you see the hip flexor action that you're using doesn't have to be very much. It's so spontaneous because now you're pulling your pelvis forward, and again, with your leg behind you a little bit, it's already ready to fall forward. So it becomes a very easy movement if you work on it a lot, this running movement, see? But if you fall off the back leg, that changes you from walking to running. So you actually have two legs off the floor, off the ground at one time. And then again, one more time, the reason that you need hip flexion as one of your movements is because you have to lift the front foot enough to allow the back foot to come off the ground so that you have both feet in the air so you have a stride. So I'm not telling you how to run, I'm telling you to go ahead and practice and experiment and play with these things and see how you can synchronize them. But this distinction will keep you from shuffling. It will keep you running forward and clear of the distinction between walking and running. So please, have fun with this. Play with it. Go back and forth between walking, feel what you're doing, and marching. And then change that to a run as you come off the back foot. So walking, walking. What did I do? What did I feel? What did I sense? What did I experience? Marching. How am I doing this? What do I feel? What's going on in my body? You know, what's different? Do it gently. Do it from up here. Let the legs relax. you run on the legs, not with the legs. Well, a lot of times when runners complain of injuries, sure, you can have some back problems, but most of the time they complain from the hips down, and especially in the lower legs and feet and so on. Well, you see, I'm not using my lower legs and feet to propel me. I'm just using them as an extension of the muscles in the stronger muscles in the center of my body, around the hips, around the torso. And so the legs become a gentle extension, an accentuator of what you do with the rest of your body. So now I could start pushing with my feet, pushing with my legs. I'd use a lot of energy up, and I would overwork the smaller muscles in my body. So again, one more time, you run on the legs, not with the legs. It's very, very, very easy movements of the core. So play with the difference between walking and running, and see how easy you can make your transition between walking and marching, and then running. And see if you can be aware, as I am right now after I've lifted my knees a few times using my psoas muscles, my main hip flexors that you cannot see, and see how relaxed your legs can feel. And this will be an awfully good thing for you to experiment with, and probably no matter who you are. So thank you again. I appreciate very much you listening to this video, and we'll see you again on the next one.